tonight. A convicted Riverside County serial killer has confessed to that crime. The body of 19-year-old Kathy Small was found in the 800 block of Bank Street. The mother of two was repeatedly stabbed and strangled. Authorities had very few leads for decades until they tested the DNA from Small's clothing. That DNA matched that of death row inmate William Lester Suff. Investigators say he confessed to Small's killing when they confronted him.
Hi everyone. Today I'm talking about a true monster. He's really terrible. I've been doing a lot on a lot of guys that aren't so known and pretty vicious, nasty things. This guy takes the cake. I say that every time, but every time I find somebody new to do a documentary on, they just get worse. This guy's terrible. Not only, let's just start it off. Trigger warning. William Lester Suff, S-U-F-F, born Bill Lee Suff, August 20th, 1950. He is an American serial, this is my intro for Wikipedia, I always do this. American serial killer, tortured and killed at least 13 women in Riverside County, California. From 1986 to 1991, earning the moniker Riverside Prostitute Killer and the Lake Eisenhower Killer, as some of his victims were dumped in Lake Eisenhower. Years earlier, in 1973, he murdered his 2-month-old baby, little girl, in Texas, a crime for which he only served 10 years of a 70-year sentence for. Yeah, he got away with that just to do what he did.
He was pleased right after the baby was born, but then Billy took up an awful lot of my time. So I couldn't pay total attention to Bill. He would smack him on the face. I told him, you don't do that. And he would kind of turn around, look at me, and it was like, oh God, now I'm gonna get it.
It meant nothing to him to beat a child.
He doesn't see them as people. He sees them merely as objects, and very similar to the way he saw his wife. They belong to him. They're his possessions.
He called me and said something's wrong with the baby. So I said, I gotta go. Dejanay was laying on the bed, and Bill was saying, there's something wrong. She's not breathing. There's something wrong. And I was like, did you call an ambulance? He says, no. They pronounced Dejanay dead. And then I found out that my baby had been so abused.
The injuries that the doctors were able to diagnose on Dejanay were extensive, and it indicated chronic physical abuse. Her liver had actually been ruptured by a fist blow to her stomach.
So that's who we're talking about. Welcome to my channel, Coffee and Crime. You're going to hear, I got a litter of puppies, so you're going to be hearing them talk throughout. They think that they got to be the guest appearance today. So anyways, hopefully I'll be posting this before New Year, so Happy New Year's to everyone, and thank you for tuning in. So little is very known about Suff's childhood, but he was the eldest of 5 children, and nothing special happened during his childhood, but he proved to be gifted at music. He was good at playing music. Although he wasn't popular, he made friends easily.
He was involved in the high school marching band. He didn't have any disciplinary issues or problems. His grades were pretty average, nothing unusual.
He was trying to get attention from his different classmates. He was like a non-entity.
And Suff's mother was very domineering, had strong influence over her husband. This is how Suff understood that he could get what he wanted by coercing others. So she could influence her husband into basically doing everything she wanted him to do. Which I guess a lot of times we do that, but I don't think to the level of what they're talking about with her. In 1960, at 10, his parents separated after accusing each other of infidelity. Suff's mother even went as far as to become a prostitute, giving him a distaste for prostitution. Soon his mother got back together with another man. This man turned out to be a very strict and very unhealthy and toxic towards the children. In 1968, at 18, Suff met Terrell, 15, in a marching band while he was playing. The couple dated before they get married in 1969. Soon after, Suff began verbally abusing Terrell. He forced her to carry out his orders under threat of death. The couple gave birth to a son, William Lester Jr., in November of 1970. A daughter, Joanna, was born in 1973 in July. From that moment of her birth, Suff could not stop hitting the newborn. So, as of September 25th, 1973, Terrell was forced to leave the family home and entrusted Suff with the baby's care. The custody arrangement went awry, and Suff hit her 2-month-old daughter and noticed that she was no longer breathing. He called Terrell to report the problem, and Terrell rushed to the marital home and found her unconscious. Emergency services confirmed the child's death, and autopsy showed that the first abuse against the child had occurred at birth. Suff and Terrell were charged with mistreatment resulting in death and remanded in custody. So he was abusing that baby from the day she was born. That very moment she was born. In 1974, a Texas jury convicted him and his wife of beating their 2-month-old daughter to death. The Court of Criminal Appeals later reversed Terrell's conviction but upheld Suff's. Finding insufficient evidence convict her as either the primary actor or principal in the baby's murder. Terrell claimed that Suff was physically abusive to her during their whole marriage. Though Suff was sentenced to 70 years in prison, he only served 10 and was paroled on March 6, 1984. His assuming demeanor allowed him to blend into society, masking his violent tendencies. Suff's ability to maintain a seemingly normal life while carrying out these heinous crimes made him particularly dangerous. As an adult, he moved to California, where he eventually found work in a computer repair shop. So he worked normal, was a normal man during the day, and a serial killer monster at night.
Riverside County Warehouse would be called upon to help with logistics. One of the regular stock clerks was local man 40-year-old Bill Suff.
William Lester Suff terrorized Riverdale County.
We had bodies all over the county. We were on this thing at 24/7.
He wanted to be an authority. He wanted to be in control.
He wasn't going to stop.
Once you get the taste of blood like that and you're a serial murderer, you're going to continue doing it.
He's targeted vulnerable women like Little and the last guy I just did about the prostitutes, Gary Ridgway. They both killed, runaways and people that drug problems and prostitutes, and they preyed on the weak and people that weren't going to be missed. So there's a lot of that back in the 80s that happens. But his were particularly heinous because it involved rape, torture, and mutilation. His victims were found in various locations across Riverside County, often with distinctive injuries, and that became his gruesome signature. The killer's ability to evade capture for years heightened public fear and frustration. The hunt for the Riverdale Reaper intensified as the body count rose. So he had 3 different names. The Riverdale. I can't say it with my tongue for some reason. But it intensified as the body count rose. Law enforcement faced challenges in gathering evidence, identifying suspects in this case, involving marginalized victims. That's what they were, the ones that were, less likely to be reported missing. Suff's eventual arrest in 1992 brought relief to the region, but also raised questions about how he managed to operate undetected for so long. William Suff's murderous rampage spanned several years, leaving a trail of victims across Riverside County. His crimes followed a pattern, targeting prostitutes and vulnerable women, and employing similar methods of killing. Suff's known killing spree began in 1989. So we're going to talk about these victims and what he did to them. And I'm going to show pictures of them as we go. So on January 10th, 1989, Rhonda Jetmore, she was 27, a sex worker entered into a sexual transaction with Suff. The agreement turned violent when he began choking her. She struck him with a flashlight she had in her hand, causing him to lose his grip, allowing her to briefly escape. Suff tackled her to the ground and began ripping off her clothes. He stuck his finger in her mouth and she bit down, causing one of her teeth to break. That's how hard she bit down. Suff pulled back and Jetmore was able to run to the door, but was tackled again. As she pled with Suff to let her go, he lost track of his glasses. She used her flashlight to shine a light on them, and when Suff went to pick them up, she ran out the door and flagged down a car. The passenger, whom she happened to know, pulled out a gun and fired at Suff, and she was able to escape. So, luckily for her, she escaped. It was early morning, shortly after dawn on October 30th, 1986. The Robidoux industrial area was a short distance from Riverside, California, near Aguamansa. Robidoux and a county population growth unmatched to any nearby region. Those who have traveled through that area often compare the trek towards the industrial area to that of the entrance to Dante's 7 levels of hell. A thick veil of smog rests over the district, and the permeating smell which emanates from many of the local factories is something most visitors care not to describe. Basically, it stinks. A local man was winding his way through the street, scavenging aluminum cans, when he noticed the body of a young woman wedged in a drainage ditch. The woman was lying on her back, her blouse and shorts ripped to shreds. She was covered in blood, and it looked as though her genital area had been mutilated. The man quickly dropped the bag of cans and ran into a local factory for assistance. The young woman was later identified as 23-year-old Michelle Yvette Gutierrez, a former resident of Corpus Christi, Texas. An autopsy revealed she suffered severe trauma to the anal and vaginal areas, and multiple stab wounds were discovered on her face, chest, and buttocks. Ligature marks on her neck suggested she had been strangled as the gruesome mutilations were taking place. In the end, investigators had a brutal murder on their hands and very few clues to follow. Less than 2 weeks later, on December 11th, investigators were called to the scene of another apparent homicide. The victim was identified as 24-year-old Charlotte Jean Palmer. A transient from Anna, Illinois, was discovered near Highway 74 in Romaland. According to the 15 most horrific murder cases ever to shock America by Bill Kelly, the scene was approximately 25 miles away from the Gutierrez murder site, and it was not immediately apparent whether the two deaths were related. In addition, Palmer's body was so badly decomposed that the coroner was unable to determine the cause of death. In 1987, in January, the naked, mutilated body of a 37-year-old Linda Ann Ortega was found along a dirt road in Lake Elsinore. The victim had been dead for at least 3 days, and high levels of alcohol and cocaine were found in her blood. Investigators later discovered that Ortega, a part-time fast food worker, had a rap sheet for drugs and prostitution. Investigators now had 3 similar homicides, and some were beginning to wonder if they had a serial killer on their hands. All doubts were put to rest as of May 2nd, when 27-year-old Martha Bess Young was discovered in a ravine not far from the Ortega murder site. The victim, originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, was discovered fully naked, spread eagle position. As with Ortega, she had a rap sheet for prostitution, and a high level of drugs were found in her body. The county coroner later determined she had been dead for approximately 3 weeks and died from a lethal dose of amphetamines, and she had been strangled. Serial killers are not uncommon in California. Investigators working the prostitute murders were all too familiar with the names William Bonin, Leonard Lake, Charles Ng, and the infamous Zodiac. They were also aware that a serial killer has an unquenchable thirst for murder, and the only way to end their murder cycle, is to get them off the streets. According to the Riverside Killer by Christina Cares, a task force was quickly formed and headed by Riverside Police Chief Leonard L. Richardson, Sheriff's Lieutenant Al Heem, Captain Bill Reynolds, Lieutenant William H. Caldwell, and Sheriff Coyce Bird, among others. Under their supervision were 14 detectives, the largest enforcement effort ever assembled in the county. Apparently aware of the efforts, police officials were taken to find him. The killer either stopped killing or found another dumping site, which remains undiscovered to this day. Regardless, by 1989, 2 years since his last known murder, the killer struck again on January 27, 1989. The body of 37-year-old Linda Mae Ruiz, a known prostitute, was discovered on the beach of Lake Elsinore. The victim's head was buried in the sand, and an autopsy revealed large quantities of alcohol in the blood. Sand was found in the victim's throat, and cause of death was listed as acute asphyxiation. Nearly 6 months later, on June 28, 1989, the body of 28-year-old Kimberly Little was discovered in Cottonwood Canyon. Police query on the victim revealed that she was a known prostitute and drug user. Her bruised and battered corpse was taken to the county coroner's office, where an autopsy revealed the presence of alcohol and drugs, like the rest. The official cause of death was listed as asphyxiation. While another murder did not sit well with the task force, they were excited to learn that there were several pubic hairs and fibers unrelated to the victim herself were discovered on the body. This evidence alone told them very little about the killer, but if these samples could play a major role in identifying him. Following the murder of Kimberly Little, local newspapers began to look into the murders, and within weeks, out-of-town reporters began arriving in Riverdale. The killer was soon dubbed the Riverside Prostitute Killer, or the Lake Elsinore Killer. Captain Bill Reynolds held several press conferences and tried to calm the public, assuring them that all efforts were being made to find the killer. Which, I guess it didn't really help much. But on November 11th, 1969, a local resident discovered the bludgeoned and mutilated body of a 36-year-old Judy Lynn Angel near Temascal Canyon Road, just northwest of Lake Elsinore. Angel had a long rap sheet, which included arrest for prostitution and drug possession. During the autopsy, they discovered several deep gashes on the victim's hands. The injuries appeared to be defensive wounds, which meant she had tried to fend off her attacker. The victim also suffered several blows to the face, which ultimately crushed her cranium. According to Jack Levin, professor of sociology and criminology at Northeastern University, the common denominator among the victims of the serial killers is vulnerability. During a June 24th interview with ABC News, Levin stated the prostitutes are the number one victims. As we can tell by all the cases with these prostitutes that I've been doing so far, there's been three. This is the third. And I haven't even done, I just started. But that's because they'll get in any car with a stranger. They can be easily dehumanized in the mind of the killer because they're not going to be missed for a very long time by family members. He also describes a serial killer as someone who murders one victim at a time, or at least 3 or 4 over a period of weeks, months, or years, with a cooling off period between the murders. The majority of serial killers hunt humans, usually for sexual thrills, and will commit the crimes over and over again until they're killed. Arrested, or in very rare cases decide to move on and find another fantasy to pursue. Very, very rare. I don't think they ever stop. During a serial killer's cooling off period, he'll fantasize about his previous murder, and like any drug, he'll be content for a period of time. However, with the passing of time, these fantasies will become less and less appealing, and he'll have to kill again in order to fulfill their desires. Oftentimes, the killings become more violent than the last, and the cooling off period becomes shorter and shorter, and the killer might also become more brazen. With the passing of each murder, they begin to feel more godlike and unstoppable. Anyway, as of December 13th, 1989, a month after the discovery of Judy Lynn Angel, the body of 23-year-old Christina Leal was found in Quail Valley.
She was found adjacent to a main road, but she was wearing men's clothing. The suspect had spent some time where he had mutilated her body. During the autopsy, The pathologist discovered that a 95-watt light bulb had been inserted into her vaginal vault. According to the pathologist, he felt that the suspect had to take quite a bit of time with her because the light bulb was intact. It hadn't broken, hadn't shattered.
Investigators found tire tracks at the scene of the crime and made several impressions which could later be used to compare with the suspect's vehicle. The victim's hands were encased in paper bags to preserve anything that might be under the nails. At the lab, the body would be examined for hairs and fibers. Later that day, during the victim's autopsy, they discovered she had been stabbed directly in her heart. Due to the victim's clothing, the wound was not immediately noticeable, which suggested that the killer had dressed her after the murder. The knife wound, while potentially fatal, was not the immediate cause of death. The victim died as a result of asphyxiation by strangulation. Several pubic hairs and fibers were removed from the body, which would later be matched to the ones discovered on Kimberly Little. Then, as the coroner inspected the victim's genital area, he made a startling discovery that the killer had shoved a light bulb up into the victim's womb, something no one present had ever seen done before. The killer's crimes were escalating. The murders were becoming more perverse, and at the time between the killings were getting shorter. There was no doubt that he would strike again, but without a single suspect to pursue, it was impossible to know where to look. On the morning of January 18, 1990, investigators were summoned to a scene east of I-15 in Lake Elsinore. Early that morning, a jogger accidentally stumbled upon the half-nude body of a female whom investigators recognized as 24-year-old prostitute named Darla Jane Ferguson. The victim's death died as a result of strangulation, which was so severe that she nearly bit off her own tongue.
In the case of Darla Ferguson in January of 1990, her body was found in a remote area along a dirt road just outside of Lake Elsinore. Now, the unique thing with Darla Ferguson was that she was nude, she was strangled just like the other victims, but her upper torso was covered in a very large black bag, a trash bag, and it was tied at the waist. And the profiler informed us that he felt the suspect had covered her face because he couldn't look at her.
As with the previous crime scene, investigators found the tracks and made several impressions, which were later matched to the others. Less than a month later, on February 8, 1990, farmers working on an orchard in High Grove discovered the nude body of 35-year-old Carol Lynn Miller, known prostitute and drug addict. She went missing 1 month earlier. The cause of death was listed as multiple stab wounds to the chest and asphyxiation. The coroner also made a note of a wound near Carolyn's right nipple. Pubic hairs were discovered on the victim, which were later matched to the ones on the file from the previous murders.
The victim was posed. She had been stabbed in the chest. And the person that killed her, it appeared, had stood over her and ate a grapefruit. The body was found in a grapefruit orchard because there was grapefruit peels on and about the body. We got a call from a sheriff's department in Wisconsin, and she said that we have an inmate here that says that he knows something about a murder that took place in Riverside, California. Are you guys interested? The information that he supplied to her and she forwarded to us was confidential information. No one was supposed to know this information. As far as cause of death, the grapefruit peelings, how the body was found, the number of stab wounds, where those stab wounds were on the body. So this information was gold. And we felt we've got this person. There was 14 task force members that responded to Wisconsin. Of course, he was asking what's going on, what is all this about, and we gave him the victim's name. Do you know her? He goes, yes, I know her. She was like my wife. We lived together for years. What do you mean? We were together. Yeah, I know her. And we said, well, do you know how she died? And he knew about the grapefruit peels. He knew how she was stabbed. Well, how do you know all this? Well, because I contacted the coroner's office when I heard that she had died, and they sent me the coroner's report, which was supposed to be sealed and not released to anybody. So what we did is we contacted Steve Sikoski and the forensic personnel, and the other investigators were at his house. And we said, this is what he's telling us. He's telling us that I believe it was in a drawer in the kitchen area. And why don't you guys take a look real quick and see if it's there. Steve did, and there it was. There was a coroner's report. So we had spent all this time, money, and effort and manpower on basically a wild goose chase.
It was 8 months before investigators were called to the scene of another horrific murder on the afternoon of November 6, 1980. A man working on an industrial plant in northeast Riverside, not far from the location where Miller was found, discovered the naked, mutilated corpse of a female hidden under some tree branches. This was by far the killer's most brutal crime yet. The victim was 33-year-old Cheryl Cocker, a prostitute and drug user, suffered severe mutilations to her body. Most shocking of all, the killer removed her right breast, placed it next to her. Investigators found shoe prints at the scene and took several photographs and impressions before transporting the body to the morgue. It was later determined the victim had died as a result of strangulation.
Cheryl Coker was the first amputation of the breast, and in the dumpster area. And if somebody had not disturbed the weeds, it might have been a long time that we had found her body. But again, in a dumpster area where people put trash, that's where she was found. From where the body was located, there was up an embankment. And when he sliced her breast off, he tossed it like a frisbee that went all the way up the embankment on the top up there. So that was rather unusual, because normally if you're going to have a mutilation, they just do it right there and drop it, and that's it.
With the death of Cocker, the Riverside Task Force had already spent over $100,000, and they're still no closer to catching the killer. According to 11, serial killers are the cream of the crop when it comes to murder. Most homicides are solved within 14 hours. Serial killers can stay on the loose for weeks, months, years, even decades. There's a self-selection process. Most serial killers very smartly wait until the most effective moment to attack their victim, clean up the crime scene afterwards, or dump the body of the victims in some desolate area. In many cases, the police have no physical evidence, especially back in them days. On December 21st, 1990, a janitor was emptying dustpans at a factory complex in Iowa, on Iowa Avenue, when he discovered the nude and carefully posed body of a young woman. The investigators on the scene recognized the victim as 27-year-old Susan Sternfield, a local prostitute and drug addict. There was no evidence of mutilation found on the victim's remains, and the county coroner later determined she died of strangulation.
It was not until Susan Sternfield, and her body was definitely posed, again in a dumpster area. So in my mind, I'm thinking that there's somebody out there that feel that these women are nothing more than trash. And so we're going to treat them like trash. After we kill them, we're going to dump them in the trash. When you're starting to find women that are placed in dumpster areas, heads being covered up, certain portions of the bodies being covered up, you start to do a little bit of a tie-in.
Victim number 13, 42-year-old Kathleen Leslie Milne, also known as Carol Kathleen Swinson or Ann Kathy Puckett, was discovered on January 19, 1991. A passing motorist spotted her body alongside the road northwest of Lake Elsinore. According to an autopsy report, the victim was rendered unconscious by several blows to the head and then strangled. She'd been dead less than 24 hours. Now, this is the one that got away. As the killer's body count continued to rise, so did the demands for justice in a city not known for community activism. Public outrage towards the faceless killer was vented in letters to newspaper editors, the Riverside Task Force, and during community meetings. National media outlets began to regularly broadcast the case, and at one point, the television program America's Most Wanted covered the killer's crimes. In an effort to find the killer, all available law enforcement personnel began combing the area. At one point, the manhunt grew to include over 200 law enforcement agencies, regardless of the spotlight upon them. The killer was undaunted and continued to elude identification and capture. Kelly wrote that on the morning of April 27, 1991, a transient stumbled upon a body of 24-year-old Sherry Michelle Pasner, a part-time maid and prostitute. The victim had been left in a flower bed in a bowling alley parking lot. She had been violated, strangled, and posed, a toilet plunger protruding from her vagina. Sick motherfucker. Following the discovery of Pasner in a brief interview with the Bay City News, Lake Elsinore Detective Bob Creed defended accusations that the department was dragging their feet because the victims were prostitutes. Standing in front of a wall which displayed the serial killer's handiwork, Gutierrez, Palmer, Ortega, Young, Ruiz, Little, Angel, Lil, Ferguson, Miller, Coker, Steinfeld, Milne, and the latest, Sherry Michelle Pasner. Creed said, "We don't care if they're drug addicts or prostitutes. They're getting the same resource levels as if they were cheerleaders." That's what he said. So on July 4th, 1991, picnickers near Railroad Canyon Road discovered the remains of 37-year-old Sherry, prostitute and drug user. The victim's hand was wrapped around nearby branches, suggested she was still alive when the killer left. Apparently, Latham had made one last feeble attempt to crawl away before succumbing to her injuries. An autopsy later revealed that the victim had been strangled and feline hairs were discovered on her corpse. According to the victim's friends, she did not own a cat. This led investigators to wonder if the killer did. Must have. Just when it seemed they were never going to catch the break, investigators got the first major lead on August 15, 1991. According to Kears, a man driving a gray van picked up a prostitute near the University of California. The woman told investigators that everything was going fine at first, but then the John became angry and began assaulting her for no reason. Luckily, she managed to jump out of the vehicle and run down the street. The man quickly sped off, but stopped at a nearby corner and picked up the girl's friend, 23-year-old prostitute named Kelly Marie Hammond. Later the same night, investigators found Hammond's naked body near the intersection of Sampson Avenue and Delilah Street. The victim had been strangled and her body was still warm. Investigators had just missed the killer. They so desperately sought
Kelly Hammond.
The woman who escaped the killer's clutches was able to help investigators create a composite sketch of the suspect and the vehicle.
Kelly told her, she goes, he's a white guy with a chubby face. He's wearing glasses. He had a police-like cap sitting on the centerfold of the van. And she really gave an awesome description. I was ecstatic. I just felt that we were getting closer now. Or we had something. We could put out that this is what the guy looks like. We could put out that be on the lookout for a gray van.
Investigators quickly issued an APB, and within hours, newspapers and television stations were broadcasting the killer's likeness. On September 13, 1991, a construction worker found the body of 30-year-old Catherine McDonald, a known drug user and prostitute, near a building site in Tuscany Hills. Kelly wrote that at first glance, investigators thought the murder might be unrelated to the others because the victim was African American, whereas all previous were Caucasian. However, upon closer inspection, they noticed the victim's right breast had been removed. But unlike Cheryl Coker's mutilation, it was not lying next to her. It apparently had been taken with him. Investigators surmised that the killer heard a recent broadcast at 6 o'clock news, during which the psychologist said that the killer was probably a white male who preyed exclusively on white women. Hence, the purpose of McDonald's murder was to show the media who was in charge.
But we knew that, at least I knew, that the suspect was reading the newspaper because our chief made a statement, possibly because the press was asking for more information on how the case was going. And he said, well, we do know that he has not killed an African-American woman. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that we had an African-American woman that was murdered.
Our victim was Catherine McDonald. She was our 5th victim for 1991.
It's messed up. The following month, on October 30th, 91, a man was driving along Summerhill Drive when he spotted something odd just off the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was a mannequin, he said. But closer inspection, he realized it was the corpse of a woman. The victim was later identified as Delilah Zamora Wallace, 35 years old, prostitute, drug addict, and mother of 5. The county coroner listed the cause of death as asphyxiation. The victim toll was now at 15. Investigators still didn't have one viable suspect. The killer was striking at least once a month now, and investigators knew it was only a matter of time before he killed again. 2 days before Christmas, 91, Eleanor Ojea Cesara's naked body was found near Victoria Avenue, just down the street from the Riverside police station. The 39-year-old drug addict prostitute had been strangled, and her right breast was missing. Proximity of the body to the police station angered investigators, who were convinced that the killer purposely placed her there in order to make fools of them.
Area. I saw it was Eleanor. I was just like, oh my God. You know, we just had this talk. I told Eleanor Casares, white male, don't get in a gray van. I told her that. She's the only one I told. And I knew she had little children. So, again, you fight back your emotions and say, we got to get this solved.
On the night of January 19, 1992, Officer Frank Orta was patrolling University Avenue in the area known for prostitution and drugs when he suddenly noticed a van matching the description of the APV making a legal U-turn. When Orta flashed his lights and siren, the 1989 Mitsubishi pulled off to the side and quickly called for backup. Within minutes, officers Don Talley and Dwayne Beckman were at the scene. The driver, a man named William Suff, appeared to be polite, but upon running his name through the computer, Orta discovered that his driver's license was suspended and his registration was expired. The suspect was then transported to the Riverside Police Station for questioning. At Riverside Police Headquarters, homicide detective Christina Kears and John Davis began questioning the suspect. The interrogation lasted for hours, and Lay says that Suff repeatedly denied any involvement in the prostitution murders. Investigators were going to need evidence to gain a conviction, and without a confession, their job became even harder. Police collected blood and hair samples from the suspect and arrested him for suspicion of multiple murders. As investigators scrambled to find evidence, members of the media began digging into Suff's past. While his family remained tight-lipped and details of his early life remained vague, they were able to obtain several bits of information from public records. According to Kears and Lane, William Lester Suff was born, we already talked about, but he was born in California. Unfortunately, when it comes to his early childhood events, there was very little known, except for the fact that, what I said earlier about him having, him being the oldest of 5 siblings. Suff's brothers were troubled. One was struck by drugs. The other was nagging predilection for pedophilia. Yeah, so 2 of them had issues. According to school classmates, Suff was friendly and skillful musician. We already talked about all that. But he was just, like everyone said, he was just friendly and personable. And then they found out about his arrest, him and his ex-wife's arrest and his daughter's death. So, William Suff's trial began on March 25th, 1995, before Judge W. Charles Morgan in the Riverside Hall of Justice. The jury, consisting of 7 men and 5 women, sat in the pews awaiting opening statements. Kelly wrote that prosecutor Paul E. Zellerbach chose to go first and explained to the jury that detectives had enough evidence to connect Suff to the murders of 13 prostitutes. He went on to describe Suff as a violent sexual sadist who enjoyed torturing and murdering women. That's quite obvious. Suff's 2 lawyers, Randolph K. Driggs, a former prosecutor who worked with Zellerbach, and Frank S. Peasley, described Suff as an easygoing man who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is it being a largely circumstantial case, Driggs told juries. So over the next several months, over 30 witnesses were called to the stand. The most damning of all was Faith Springer, the State Department of Justice's foremost criminologist on hair and fiber analysis. According to Keir, Springer testified the microscopic samples of the hair found at two murder scenes matched Suff's own hairs, and that fibers from a pillow, blanket, and sleeping bag found inside Suff's van were similar to those discovered near the bodies of Kim Little and Christina Lill. In addition, Springer said a towel that covered Little's naked body contained two fibers similar to floor carpeting in Suff's vehicle. Other fibers which were found on Suff's car seat matched that of a t-shirt and sock found on Lil's body. After 54 days of testimony, 4 days of deliberations, the jury found him guilty on 12 of the 13 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The jury also found him guilty of multiple murder, use of deadly weapon, and lying in wait. The following day, August 17, 1995, Suff was given the death penalty. To this day, he's sitting at San Quentin awaiting his death penalty. He continues to maintain his innocence, claims that police used him as an scapegoat. It's been rumored that Suff used 2 of his victims' breasts in his chilies he prepared at the Riverside County Employees Annual Picnic, and he won in first place for that. But that information was never confirmed. So, to this day, he's just sitting on death row. It's been since 95. This man's just living still, sitting on death row. He finally admitted to murder on October 15th, 2022.
What was the name of the victim?
Kathy.
Kathy. Approximate age? Physical description? I mean, like blonde hair, white hair, brown hair, tall, skinny.
Brown hair, and it was short. Short brown hair.
What was the area? Was it like?
It was a cul-de-sac.
A cul-de-sac.
Yeah, 86, but I'm not sure.
And it was definitely Los Angeles County?
It was Pasadena.
Pasadena.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something.
I hope you enjoyed this. There's a lot of facts, a lot of everything. I'm going to be showing some pictures and everything else throughout this. But like and subscribe and come back and see me next time. Thank you.